Welcome back to Stories from the River. This is your host, Charlie Malouf, and we've got a treat for you today. I am here with Dr. Timothy Nelson, the CEO of and founder of HeartWorks. Tim, welcome to the pod.
Hey, it's great to be here, Charlie. Thank you.
This is going to be a big treat for us. HeartWorks is a phenomenal organization. I'm excited about this, what we think will be a 3-part series to tell the HeartWorks story.
Welcome to Stories from the River, a show in which we go behind the scenes at Broad River Retail.
Are you the president and CEO and founder of HeartWorks?
Yeah, so we started HeartWorks as a group focused on curing congenital heart disease. And so we've been on this journey together for about 12 years now. And we're just getting started with some pretty amazing technology that we're going to talk about today.
I love it. I can't wait. Okay, you've watched and listened to some of our podcast episodes, right?
Yes.
So you know that I can't get really started without kind of knowing about you, so tell us a little bit about kind of where you're from, your background, and kind of how you got into this whole HeartWorks endeavor.
Yeah, so look, I'm just a kid from western Wisconsin. I grew up in a family that had farming and a stepdad that was a physician. And so I grew up just expecting to be a physician. Is when I was going through high school and college. I went to the Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was training to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. It was my dream.
Wow.
And it turns out that during my training, I realized that we need to do more for these kids with congenital heart disease. And one thing led to the next, and I decided that we needed to spend more time doing research and develop new products and doing the standard clinical surgical care of kids with complex congenital heart disease just wasn't satisfying to me. And there was a bigger future that we needed to do together. And so started that journey in medical school and just kind of dreaming about what could we do to be bigger and better with having better outcomes. And so, just a kid from Wisconsin that grew up wanting to be a doctor and realized that, maybe we could do something more than that.
That's super cool. I want to just pull the layer back on a couple things. What is a cardiothoracic surgeon?
Yeah. So those are the people that do surgery on the heart and to be able to do the repairs on the heart of children that are born with heart defects. So kids that are born with missing heart parts or valves or missing pieces of their heart. A surgeon is typically required in the complex cases to re-engineer the plumbing. So really a cardiothoracic surgeon is a sophisticated plumber. We put plumbing back together that's broken and trying to make the heart work better.
Quite sophisticated, I might say. Okay, and so how severe is the issue of congenital heart defects? And was this a big problem while you were in medical school, or you always kind of gravitated towards cardiology?
I just always loved the heart. I just always fascinated by that for whatever reason. But what most people don't realize is 1 out of every 100 newborn babies, 1 out of 100 are born with some form of congenital heart defect today. Wow. So it's more common than people realize. But these kids are beautiful kids, look healthy, look normal, and they're amongst us. They're adults living with these conditions, and you don't even know it unless they share the story with you. So it's not obvious, and so people don't think about it. But 1 in 100 is a big number, but it's also a small number. And we can talk about those statistics and details and how that compares to other things. But it's actually more common than what people realize. 1 in 100.
That is fairly common. Is that global? Is that in the U.S.? Is it different U.S. versus international?
It's not different. It's usually pretty consistent across countries and regions.
And is there something that happens do you know how it's caused? Or
about 5, 10, maybe 20% of the time, it's a genetic cause of these birth defects that kids are born with, meaning they got the genes from mom and dad in a combination that just led to a complication. But the majority, we just still don't know.
Wow.
It's just a random, no fault to mom, no fault to dad, no fault to anybody. It just is a spontaneous delay in the development that we don't actually fully understand in the majority of these kids.
And that's where your research would kind of come in to kind of understand it better.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then, what is does the life expectancy get altered with a congenital heart defect, or is it called defect or disease?
People refer to the same. So CHD, disease or defect, it depends on who's referring to it. This is the humble reality of it. In the most severe forms of congenital heart defects or disease, the statistics are 50% of these kids don't make it to their 5th birthday.
Ooh.
50% may not even make it to their 5th birthday. Is a humbling reality of the most severe forms of this born in the United States. So there's a wide spectrum of outcomes of good and bad. And there's a huge opportunity to develop new products and new solutions that go beyond our standard surgical care. And that's, really what we're here to talk about eventually is the vision of what it takes to be able to say, okay, we can do better, and the massive action that has to be deployed to do that. But it really starts with a mindset of, here's the problem, here's a series of potential solutions, and then putting a team together and a work plan to go make that happen. And, really back up in a second and just realize that that's no different than what any of us do in our professional lives, right? Get a plan based on a problem, have a purpose, and go for it. And this is probably the biggest challenge that our team or any team I know of has tried to take on. This is like taking the rocket to the moon, is trying to rebuild the hearts, right?
Now, I know how you might be the most passionate person on CHD, maybe in the world, which is awesome. And I love how you're going straight to the problem and everything, but I'm not going to let you off the hook a little bit. I want to get more on the history. So we're going to rewind the tape just a little bit more. Okay. So personally, did you finish medical school? Did you go right into this, or did you start seeing patients? Did you go into surgery? Walk us through kind of the ideas percolating. You're in medical school. This is the direction you want to go with your life, your career. And then at some point, HeartWorks happens. I'd love to get more on that runway.
Well, so there was a week that I've shared a couple of times before where I was a medical student and we were in a surgical case of a 5-kilo baby, 10 pounds, very young infant, had a severe form of congenital heart defect that required an open heart surgery at that age. And we told the family that there was a 50% chance that the baby would not make it out of the operating room. It was high risk, but we had no option. We had to go for it. We had to do our best. We got through the surgery, and I was in the room. I was on the team as a medical student, and you go into that OR with this trepidation of we might not go back with smiles on our face when we see the family the next time. And we got out of the OR. Things went well. We got to go back to the family and say everything went well. Your daughter did great. And it was just a really emotional moment of, wow, we did it. I mean, I literally remember high-fiving each other as we're walking out of the OR, right? Because
it's like winning the Super Bowl, right?
It was
euphoria,
like
but it's like much better. Like, this is awesome.
It was that level of feeling, right? Days later, I was in the clinic seeing a 4-year-old child that had a very similar surgery 4 years earlier. Child has heart failure, has nothing we can do for the child. We have to tell the family there's nothing we can do, like literally palliative care. And at that moment, I had this gut feeling in my gut of, what was I celebrating 4 days earlier? Like, why was I so excited, right? Was I celebrating? And I don't want to take anything away from a family that has 4 years with their child in a situation like that. That's not the point here. But really looking internally, why was I celebrating, right? And I realized that I was celebrating with the colleagues that we were just happy that we did what we did and we got through a stressful situation, right? But we weren't thinking about the long term. We were thinking about the immediate. We got out of the OR. And as I started reflecting on that as a medical student, realizing that what are we really doing here? Are we really creating the long-term path that we can be proud of? And that's what really led me down the pathway of doing more research and figuring out how to use cell biology and stem cells to recreate and rebuild hearts. And that's the beginning of this journey that we're on today.
So you really went into an immersive period of deep reflection, which then gave you a conviction of purpose for where you wanted to go with your
100%.
life. Love it. Hence my t-shirt. Purpose.
I love your shirt.
Okay. So you had this aha moment for your life and for long-term problem solving, if you will, solutions. Then so your medical school, how did HeartWorks happen? Walk us through that journey.
So I graduated from medical school. I did my medical degree and my PhD. So I like to tell people I was a slow learner. It took me a long time to get out of school. And then I decided I wasn't going to do surgery full time. I needed to do cardiology to have more time to do research. Went to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota to do my fellowship in cardiology. And during that time, a lot of things are percolating, lots of things are developing. I ended up getting an NIH grant, a National Institute of Health research grant on this technology that was just invented where you can take a patient's own skin cells and you can convert it into their stem cells, and then you can convert that into their beating heart tissue in the lab. And so that technology was the basis of the first grant that I got. And that was just a really exciting period of time, like anything is possible type of vision, but it's in the lab and small scale, that's where it started. And so as I was in my training, this technology developed and the ideas started building and you started dreaming about the what ifs, the crazy hairball ideas of, what if this could actually be used to treat patients? And people would talk about that, but nobody really had a clear vision on that. But that was all then bubbling as I was doing my residency and finishing my training at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.
Can you say who invented this technology?
Yeah, so Shinya Yamanaka was the Nobel laureate that invented this induced pluripotent stem cell technology.
Say that one more time.
Induced pluripotent stem cells, IPS cells. And really it came out of the President Bush's era of embryonic stem cells, where there was a ban on all embryonic stem cell research. Embryonic stem cells were exciting at this time period because they could differentiate into any cell type in your body. That was a game changing, right? However, science and medicine would never address the ethical, moral, legal conflicts that human embryonic stem cells creates. And so there was a ban on that research at the time. That ban, I think, was the impetus to find an alternative. And the alternative was to use a few genes that could be overexpressed in ordinary cells like your skin to reprogram it to make it think it was, quote unquote, an embryonic stem cell. So now we had the same capabilities of an embryonic stem cell, but we didn't create or destroy an embryo. It was from your own body. And that was like the game-changing breakthrough that everybody was talking about at this time period.
What year is that?
So this was in the late 90s, early 2000s.
It's funny how necessity is the mother of invention.
100%.
Okay, we have a roadblock here. We're going to figure it out.
100%.
You strike me as a big idea guy. You're reflecting on what can this technology do? And all these ideas, like you said, are percolating and you're like, okay, what if? Is it fair to say you're the big idea guy?
Yeah, no, I'm the idea guy. I'm the dreamer. I'm the one that is helping try to pull together the vision and the technology. And it was just me in my lab doing my own research at the time and dreaming about this stuff. And that was where it started. But, if it weren't for the team that got built around that vision, I'd still be in the lab with the small ideas.
So you got the grant, and take us from the grant to HeartWorks.
Yeah. So, we've used this amazing technology to make human heart tissue in the lab in a small plate. And the first experiments that we did, we used small animal research to show that we could do this in a mouse model. And I just had done this experiment, just had published it, and fortuitously changed my life. There was a couple at Mayo Clinic. You might know them, Todd and Karen Wanick.
I do know Todd and Karen Wanick. Todd is the CEO of Ashley Furniture.
So Todd and Karen were at Mayo Clinic, and they got introduced to me of the science that we're working on. And I was just literally a kid at the time, and I was so excited to tell anybody about this technology and what it could possibly lead to. And one thing led to the next, and over the course of a few months, we put together a proposal of how we could transform these ideas into actually treating patients. And as we know publicly, and it's been shared, Todd and Karen have a beautiful daughter, Gabrielle, who has born with a congenital heart defect. And so that was really where it started, when we started dreaming about what could we do. If we did it here, why can't we do it there and apply it? And Todd and Karen said, let's do this. Let's put a massive plan together.
Is this in the late 2000s?
This was 2009 is those conversations were happening.
And Todd's a big thinker as well, and a big dreamer as well, and loves taking massive action. You've used that phrase a couple of times. And so were they at the Mayo Clinic for treatment for Gabrielle at the time?
Yeah. So they've been lifelong patients and had their care at Mayo Clinic. And so that was how we originally were able to meet each other, 100%.
And I know the Wanick family has been big supporters of the Mayo Clinic, and you're just coming out. You've just written this paper, I guess, and it gets published, and you kind of get paired with them, and it's technology based in how medicine can transform the world. So he said, let's do this, and so what happens? And he says, do you want to start an organization? Do you want to you're going to move away from doing cardiology and writing research papers and start this organization?
So what's really remarkable is that it takes a commitment, right? The big ideas, big decisions start with a commitment. Where does that commitment, that conviction come from? It comes from a different place for all of us, right? Obviously, Todd and Karen had a purpose for their conviction with their daughter, Gabrielle. I had a conviction that we need to do things better. And this had been bubbling for almost a decade in my training. So it was just a perfect time. And they made the courageous decision to go in with a major gift to start a program around this. And I made a courageous decision to say, this is going to be my life purpose. And we're going to stop doing the clinical pathway that I started on. And we're going to go all in on this. And so that was that commitment and the courage that coming together at that time. We honestly had no idea where it was going to lead us. But we made that commitment to that vision together, and this has gotten bigger and better, and has started something that none of us, including Todd and I, could have seen from the beginning.
Okay. And Todd's also from Wisconsin.
He is.
Is Arcadia Western Wisconsin or mid Wisconsin?
It's Western Wisconsin. It's actually about 40 minutes away from my hometown. So where I grew up in Osseo, Wisconsin, Arcadia, Wisconsin is just down the road from us. Okay.
And so I guess you and Todd are going through who you guys know, similar folks. And so wasn't there some some generational connections there?
Well, so one of the most important people in my life is my grandfather, Noble Cleven, who's now passed away. But Noble Cleven was a sheriff of Trempealeau County. And Ron Wanick and my grandfather, Noble Cleven, knew each other. And when I first met Ron, he shared these stories, and it just was amazing that we grew up literally 45 minutes apart, and here I was at Mayo Clinic meeting them for the first time. So it was pretty remarkable how small the world is.
Isn't Ron a great storyteller?
He's the best storyteller.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. Okay, so the Wanick family is saying, well, this guy's from 40 minutes away. We know his grandfather. He's a good egg. He's good people, and he's really smart, and he's got some big ideas. Before we kind of go into the history of the early years of HeartWorks, you talked about your grandfather, Noble Cleveland?
Yeah, Cleven.
Say it one more.
Cleven.
Cleven. Okay, Cleven. What is one of your favorite stories about your grandfather?
Boy, there's a lot of those stories. I don't know if I can share some of them online, but I guess
well, it's not live television. We can cut if we need to. I figured you might have something to say about your granddad.
Oh man, Ron tells an amazing story. I don't know if we can tell.
Maybe I'll ask it this way, Tim. What is one thing you really learned from your granddad that is kind of inspiring you and working in your life today?
Yeah, Charlie, that's a great question. So the reason my grandfather Noble was so important to me is he was a sheriff of Trempealeau County. I was just a kid. And I was living with him at the time when my mom and dad got a divorce, and he really became kind of a father figure in many ways in that. And I spent a lot of time with him on his farm in Trempealeau County, Strum, Wisconsin. And he was a sheriff, and I remember distinctly traveling around in the squad car with him all the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that made the biggest impression on me is we do my grandfather would do prisoner transfers between facilities. And so these prisoners would come out with handcuffs and leg shackles, pretty scary for a kid. 5, 6, 7 years old kind of kid I was. Put them in the back seat of the car. I'd sit in the front with my grandfather. And my grandfather, over the course of an hour and a half drive to the facility transfer, would have this conversation with this prisoner in the back seat as if he was just his best friend, as if he was a conversation that he's had 10 times. Where did he come from? What is his life story? Questions you're asking. And he would coach and he would mentor this prisoner and he would inspire them to think differently, let's get through this. What are you going to do when you get out of here? What's next? And I just was scared by these prisoners as a kid. And by the time they got out of the car, they felt like they were family and friends. And that I just took for granted my entire life growing up, that you treat everybody that way.
Yeah.
And as I reflect back on that moment, it's pretty remarkable what my grandfather did and the way he acted. It's also pretty remarkable that he'd put a 6-year-old in a squad car, and probably wouldn't happen these days.
It's so funny because I don't even know if after he dropped him off, if he talked, he probably didn't ask you, hey, what do you think of that conversation?
He didn't. And, it wasn't even like that was an unusual conversation. It was just part of the daily routine. It wasn't anything special.
The thing about that, the phrase that I think of is parenting, mentorship, leadership. It's caught a lot more than it's taught.
100%.
It's watch what I do, not what I say.
100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get back on track here. So you decided to start HeartWorks 2010?
Yeah, actually HeartWorks started in 2020, so there was another 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Where we were actually the Todd and Karen Wanick family program for hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Say that one once.
I'm not going to
Todd
attempt.
and Karen Wanick family program for hypoplastic left heart syndrome.
Okay.
Was the program at Mayo Clinic where they were major benefactors, our major benefactors at Mayo Clinic, and we nucleated the team within our research program at Mayo Clinic. And then we started a for-profit company to help commercialize the technology. And then one thing led to the next. And 10 years later, we now have the formation of HeartWorks as you know it today.
I didn't know all that, so I'm learning something today. So from 2010 until when was the for-profit company started, and what's the name of the for-profit company?
Yeah, so we started Regen Theragnostics as the for-profit company. We started that in 2010. And the idea at the time was we got this grant. We're making these amazing cells. We've got this vision of how do we bring these cells to clinical trials, which was a, BHAG, right? Big, hairy, audacious goal.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's Jim Collins, big, hairy, audacious goal.
Love it, right? And so that was the idea. And so we had to start making these cells and manufacturing. Well, I didn't want my lab to be doing all this contract work. And then a lot of people started wanting these same cells because this was the hot thing at the time in biomedical research. So we started Regen with my brother, and we started a manufacturing company to make these stem cells. And we would supply my lab and other labs at Mayo Clinic with these cells being manufactured out of Regen. And that's how we started, and that's how we built the world's largest repository of these cells to do the research and understand the disease and to further refine our thinking on it. And that's how we started, and we were doing that for about 10 years, growing an academic research program and building collaborations across the globe with that type of infrastructure between Mayo and Regen. And then there was a tipping point where we outgrew that. And
pause. That's fascinating. So Regen,
Theragnostics.
Theragnostics.
We like big words, don't we?
Well, I guess that's part of being in medicine, right? So Regen Theragnostics was started in 2010. Is it jointly owned by you, your brother, and the Wanick family?
Yeah, this is a great question.
I'm just asking out of ignorance. I don't know.
And you don't even know the whole story, but you're setting it up perfectly here. So
unintentionally
it started out as a lot of academic programs like Mayo Clinic. You can be entrepreneurs and you can license technology to other companies. And so we licensed the technology out of Mayo Clinic to Regen. I was a co-founder of Regen, had equity royalty rights to it. And my brother was the outside partner that we started. And, we just bootstrapped it from the ground up, just building very simple. I think we started in a 1,100 square foot laboratory in the biobusiness building in Rochester, Minnesota, and just started, building cells and solving problems and just trying to stay alive and perfect this manufacturing process. And so it was jointly owned between Mayo Clinic and my brother, and that was, no big deal, no big money. It was just that was the legal structure that allowed us to get started.
Okay. So your brother, we were talking at our event last night, learned a little bit about your brother. What's his role today? What's his name? You guys, he's your older brother by, I think, 2 years and a day.
There you go. You remember.
Yeah. And so what was he doing previously, and kind of what's your relationship like with him?
Yeah. So my brother, Matt Nelson, has been, by my side. We've been together, as brothers, best friends. We started a window washing business together when I was in high school, and we've just always done everything together. Co-owned our ski boats together, and just, our families are just completely merged together. So it's been a blessing and privilege to be working with your best friend, and the trust and confidence that we have between each other is just unparalleled to anybody else I have in my work life, right?
And you're a doctor by trade, and he's
an industrial engineer by training. Worked with Arthur Anderson, IBM Business Consulting. Started a small business insurance agency to be closer to home for many, many years. And then out of that, we co-nucleated this idea of regen in the manufacturing. And with time, he jumped out of his small insurance agencies and started running and being the operator and president of Regen at the time. And his experience in business consulting, his experience in running a small business, being an operator and integrator, was the critical piece that, big thinkers like me need, because I won't get stuff done. It takes a partnership like that. So
you pair very well together.
It's an absolute requirement to have that kind of partnership.
And there's just implicit trust in you guys love each other and enjoy being around each other. So it's a great partnership, great way
100%.
to kind of. And so Regen, it was you and your brother for several years. And I've not heard this phrase before, co-nucleated or nucleated the team. So walk us through the team from 2010 to 2020.
Yeah, so this work is you take a piece of skin from a patient, you chop it up, you grow the fibroblast out of the skin in a plate. This is kind of when you cut yourself and you get a scar. Those cells that are healing your skin are what we grow out in the lab.
Wow.
Then we reprogram them, which that means is we put some viruses and reintroduce some embryonic-like genes to trigger a memory in these cells to go back in time to become a stem cell. This all takes months and months and months. And you got to realize that you have to feed these cells every single day. So you take the media off the cells, you put new media on. It's a manual process of feeding the cells every day. So as we sit here today, there's been somebody in this lab for over 4,800 days that have been continuously in the lab every single day, feeding these cells, cultivating these cells, growing these cells. There hasn't been a day, knock on wood, that we've had to be shut down. We've moved through different facilities. We've transferred cells. We've grown many times since then, but that's really the essence of building a team that is the hands-on manual labor. And that's what I was doing from the beginning, and now we've got world-class people doing this.
No days off.
No days off.
I love that you know the exact number of days. Mark Batterson has a quote, if you want to make the days count the days.
Awesome.
And he's got a lot of great stories around that. So you're counting the days, there's no days off, and it was just you, and now you've got a great world-class team building these cells. And so that takes us to 2020, and then so HeartWorks is born. So What's HeartWorks? How was it born? You said you kind of outgrew kind of Regen, I guess, or being as part of the Mayo Clinic, the family foundation. And so kind of how did those conversations transpire to say, I think we're ready for a bigger, bolder dream or identity?
So the HeartWorks is a independent, nonprofit legal entity that we recognize we need to create because congenital heart disease is too small, too rare of a market to be able to infuse capital dollars and scale it fast enough. That we needed to have dollars in the philanthropy realm to extend the product development cycle so that we could de-risk the technology before it was ready for raising the capital dollars and scaling a product into manufacturing that's, commercializable. And we needed to bring multiple hospitals together. We didn't have enough patients at Mayo Clinic. So we had to nucleate a hospital network of 11 pediatric hospitals all across the country. And we had to figure out how to get hospitals to work together collaboratively. Hospitals are not engineered to work collaboratively together. And so this was a challenge we had to figure out. And so the way we solved that problem was by creating this nonprofit, HeartWorks, to be able to create the assets, the know-how, the tools, the people that could then service the patients at multiple hospitals.
Interesting.
That allowed us to scale the clinical trials network and treat more patients and expand that. What we've learned in that process is that team of teams approach that we created under the HeartWorks banner was going to be catalytic to the growth of where we could go. But also, the counterbalance to that is you can't expect philanthropy to, pass the hat every week and keep the lights on, and the bureaucracy that seeps into the nonprofit scared us to death, because that's not our goal either. So what we ended up doing is we ended up engineering an interesting hybrid between the nonprofit HeartWorks and the for-profit Regen. So think about the nonprofit philanthropy engagement of the hospitals can develop the cure as long as we have a for-profit commercialization arm that can sustain the delivery of the cure and make it sustainable. If you want something to be sustainable, you got to sustain it. And to sustain it, you got to have a commercial plan. So that engineered this interesting hybrid between the nonprofit, for-profit. But let me just back up before people think that's too complicated. It's actually the same thing that Mayo Clinic and all academic institutions do. They develop technology in a nonprofit academic setting, and they license it to a for-profit to scale it. What we did is we engineered a closed ecosystem where we did that all within a closed ecosystem where a team of teams had the same purpose and the same mission to cure congenital heart disease. And so that allowed us to align partners in unique, creative ways, and it gave us access to capital and the philanthropic side to extend the runway to really take on bigger and bolder products as we're dreaming about today.
And we do have a section we're going to get into the kind of future outlook. You're using this phrase team of teams.
Yeah.
Identify who you think, who are the different teams as part of this global team.
So we have an internal and an external view on that, right? Internally, we have a team of teams. We have basic researchers, PhD scientists, cell biologists, geneticists, type of people doing research for the sake of new knowledge. On another hand, we have a manufacturing team that has to produce a product reproducibly, high quality, high throughput, and take the research ideas and make it work. And then you've got clinical trials teams that have to bring the product into a clinical trial, treat a patient, inject the product into a 3-month-old baby's heart during an open heart surgery. And so you've got researchers, manufacturing, clinical trials, and you got marketing, communication people to tell the story, get it out there to inspire more people to be part of it. There's conflicts between these teams, right? Every team has these, right?
Sure.
There's friction, not in a bad way, but in a healthy way. There's limited resources. How do we balance the resources to go from an idea to a clinical trial to a product development? So that's the team of teams. We embrace the friction, we embrace the debate, we embrace that. So internally, we have teams of teams that all have the same purpose, to cure congenital heart disease. And that's no different than a manufacturing facility, whether it's furniture, cars, wherever. You've got researchers, you got manufacturers, you got product engineers, and they all have to work together to go at a lower cost, higher throughput, higher quality, and engineer that together.
And your role and your brother's role, if I kind of go forward, might be to thread those teams together.
100%.
To kind of be at a macro view and hear all the inputs and make sure we're all rowing in the same direction together.
100%.
To remove the friction.
Yep.
And make sure there's more alignment and cohesiveness.
Yeah, I would say I never want to remove the friction. I never want to eliminate the tension. I want to embrace it and leverage it. So, there's a famous story. Who told this story? I'm going to give the right credit to this. Was it Steve Jobs' story, maybe? I forget whose story this was. A young boy, maybe it was Steve Jobs, that had a neighbor went and got rocks out of the garden and put it into this can that was shaking and said, come back tomorrow. And he had these dirty rocks in a canister that was shaking, making a lot of noise. I think it was Steve Jobs that came back as a young child next day, and the gentleman opened up the can, pulled out these beautifully polished stones, right? And so that's what I like to think about, is that we want friction. We want the edges to rub, because that's what polishes our ideas, that polishes our thinking, polishes our mindset to be able to think more clearly and have more focus. And so that's what we talk about in the team of teams, that we like those edges, we like those debates, and that's a good thing. But you're 100% right. At the end of the day, we put on the front of everybody, why are we doing this? Why?
Yeah, what's the outcome? What's the to cure CHD?
You put the face of Gabrielle on the table. You put the face of Ava, Bella, Miles. All of these kids are born with half a heart, and all of these kids have their different story. And you ask yourself, is this decision we're about to make as a team going to make it faster to have a transformative outcome for these children, these adults, or is it going to slow us down? And when you put that purpose and that why on the table, when you get to the point where you just have to make a decision, suddenly clarity becomes really, really obvious.
Yeah. When you put a human being at the end of the supply chain, you can obviously figure out why your work matters and find purpose in the work.
100%.
Tim, this has been great for walking us through the history of how we kind of got here. I want to stop now at this point, and I'd love to kind of bring you back, talk about some of these success stories and some of the events that we're having, and then where HeartWorks is today, its current mission, vision, and what you're working on today to kind of really cure CHD. How's it sound?
Love it.
All right, that's all for this episode, part 1 of our 3-part series with Dr. Timothy Nelson of HeartWorks. Come back next time and we'll get into where HeartWorks is today. Thanks so much for joining us, and check back next time wherever you get your fresh content, whether it's YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, we'll be there. Thanks so much for joining us, and leave us a comment, subscribe, and let us know what you'd like to see next. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Stories from the River. To check out more episodes, visit storiesfromtheriver.com. Join us again next week, and remember to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast.